More Magic Arena and back to some historic best of one. Today we're going to be playing around with Esper Reanimator. This is a deck that we've sort of visited in the past. The last time we played it, it was in Mardu colors, and I decided I actually wanted to switch things up a little bit with this deck and check out some brand new cards that came with the newest sets since I've last played. Historic anyway. So let's talk about the general idea of the deck. We're basically trying to get down many big boys and girls as early as turn 3 or turn 4 usually, with Unburial Rites and Priest of the Fell Rites. So Priest of the Fell Rites is from when did this come out? Did this come out with the Jumpstart stuff? I can't remember. It's from one of the Modern Horizons set anyway. I'm pretty sure it came out with the Jumpstart Historic Horizons. It's a 2-mana 2/2 anyway, and you can pay 3 life, sacrifice Priest, and return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. But you can only do this as a sorcery, so you have to let it untap, which is kind of like a little bit of a problem. But once you do that, you pay 3 life, and you get one of these big old boys into the graveyard, out of the graveyard into the field. You can also do Unburial Rites as well, which is a 5-mana sorcery to reanimate a creature, and then it also has flashback of 4, so you can cast it out of your graveyard that way. Something to note with Priest of the Fell Rites, and it's a really cool thing that you can do with this, is it has Unearth, which means you exile this card and return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. It has haste, so you can immediately sack it to reanimate. Unearth is a ability that is, for the most part, uncounterable, which means in counterspell matchups like Jeskai Control, unless they've got Commit to Memory, which can counter a spell or a trigger on the stack. I think Commit to Memory does that, right? Tail's End and stuff like that does as well, but they're very rare cards to come across, is basically my point. As long as they don't have one of those, Unearth is uncounterable, which means in the Jeskai matchup, what you can do is Unearth Priest on 5, and then reanimate Nezahal Primal Tide, 7-mana 7/7, that can't be countered. And the upside of playing Esper for this particular deck is that we can cast all of our creatures, all of our big boys. So an uncounterable 7/7 for 7. And it gives you no maximum hand size, and whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you draw a card. So in the Jeskai matchups, that's basically every single card they play. But the upside is, unlike most of our other creatures here, this one is really good at playing around board wipes, because when our opponent goes for a Wrath of God, we get to draw a card. And then once we draw a card, we can discard 3 to exile Nezahal Primal Tide and return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So we basically take it out of play for an entire turn whenever we like. So if our opponent interacts with it in any way that would kill it, we can take it out of play, which is really nice. It means that we don't have to rely on reanimating it again with Priest of the Fell Rites or Unburial Rites. Makes it nigh on impossible for your opponent to really do much about it. Short of a creature-based removal spell, which, you know, control decks aren't really going to run. We also do have Ulamog in here as well, which has Indestructible, so any damage-based effects, any wrath effects won't stop Ulamog from coming out, so we kind of have that same interactable point with Priest of the Fell Rites. But let's talk about why we're playing Esper. Well, from Midnight Hunt, we got Faithful Mending. 2-mana instant to gain 2 life, draw 2 cards, and then discard 2 cards. The life gain's very relevant. The discard and draw is obviously very relevant. We put all of our fatties into the graveyard, and then we even get the option to flash it back as well. For 3 mana, we can do this effect, which is really good. Something that kind of doesn't immediately look obvious is that cards like Faithful Mending and Otherworldly Gaze, which I have been extremely impressed with in this deck, 9 times out of 10, this card's going to be very bad anytime you use it, but this deck in particular really uses Otherworldly Gaze to an extreme degree. It's a 1-mana, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put any number of them into your graveyard and the rest back on the top of your library in any order, so it's not going to draw you cards. However, as the point I was going to get to with Faithful Mending is, it has flashback, which means we can cast it from the graveyard, which means if we mill a card with flashback into our graveyard, we're essentially drawing a card. So we've got Otherworldly Gaze with Flashback, we've got Faithful Mending, we've got Unburial Rites, we've got Priest that can be unearthed. All of these cards, if they go into the graveyard, it's like drawing a card. So Stitcher Supplier that mills 3 can mill 3 on turn 1, and potentially any of those 3 cards, if they are these cards here, you can think of it as though this card drew you cards. So this is a 1-mana cantrip that also gets your big boys into the graveyard. There's very few cards in this deck that you don't actually want in your graveyard. The only one really is Bone Shards, which is our removal spell of choice. 1 mana as an additional cost to cast a spell. Either sack a creature or discard a card. So if we've got a big boy in our hand, we discard that. If we've got Stitcher Supplier in play, we sacrifice that. And then we get to remove a creature or planeswalker for 1 mana. It's stupid. It's very stupid. But yeah, these 8 cards here are going to mill. They're going to draw cards. All of the cards that they're basically drawing us are great at hitting the cards that don't draw us cards. Let's talk about our payoff package then. So we've kind of talked about Nezahal and Ulamog and their usage here. We've also got Sheoldred Whispering One, a 7-mana 6/6 with Swamp Walk. At the beginning of your upkeep, you return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. So the use for this card is basically the situations where your opponents don't have a great deal of removal, and then you can use Sheoldred as a repeatable reanimation spell. As you can imagine, there are a lot of things that Sheoldred can reanimate that will make it very, very, very difficult for your opponent to continue winning. Excuse me. And then also, if your opponent has an indestructible card, a single card like that, like an Ulamog, this is one way that we can get rid of it, which is really nice. Serra's Emissary, we've got 2 copies of this. This can win us the game in creature matchups, because once you've reanimated it, you name a creature card, or a card type, you name creature, and then you and creatures you control have protection from the chosen card type. So fight spells don't do anything, creatures don't deal any damage, and they don't interact with your creatures anymore, so you're just left with a 7-mana 7/7 that flies over and beats your opponent until they die. So if you go against mono green elves, this is an instant win. Gruul is kind of an instant win, but not really, because they have Bone Crusher Giant. So you have to be concerning yourself with the Stomp side, or even Questing Beast, because both of those cards stop protection from working. But that's why we have 2 copies, because if we get one into play and say name creature, and then get the other into play and name instant, suddenly, you know, there are very few cards that can really kill us from that point forward. Elish Norn is another kind of I win the game card. It might not look it on at first sight, but it certainly does win quite a fair few matchups, like Mono White Humans, giving your opponents creatures -2/-2, and your creatures +2/+2 is very backbreaking, and it basically bans your opponent from playing creatures in a lot of matchups. Like elves will really struggle with an Elish Norn on 4, similar to the Serra's Emissary, so we can have like 4 cards for that matchup. But Elish Norn also giving your creatures +2/+2 will help you close out the game. Suddenly your Stitcher Suppliers are 1-mana 3/3s, and you know your Mad Tritons get quite large as well. Burning Rune Demon, 6-mana 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for 2 cards not named Burning Rune Demon, and you put one in. Your opponent puts one into your hand, and then the other into your graveyard. The cool thing you can do with Burning Rune Demon is pick up both Priest of the Fell Rites and Unburial Rites, and no matter which one they put into your graveyard, you get 2 casts, basically, of the other cards. So if they put Unburial Rites in your graveyard, you can flash it back and play your Priest. If they put the Priest in the graveyard, you can unearth it and hardcast the Unburial Rites. But you can also put things into your hand as well, like creatures, since we have plenty of ways of discarding them, then it's not so much of a concern that way. So you can grab your Silver Bullet reanimation target, for example. And finally, Cataclysmic Gearhulk is a creature-based board wipe for us. It's a 5-mana 4/5 with Vigilance. Enters the battlefield, each player chooses artifact, creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the permanents they control, and sacrifices the rest. So Cataclysmic Gearhulk being an artifact means that if we reanimate this and we've got one other big old creature in play, we can pick the other big old creature as creature, and then the Gearhulk we can pick as artifact, and then we get to keep 2 creatures in play. Our opponents most of the time just get to keep one creature in play. It's not always going to be like the crazy board wipe you expect from it. Sometimes your opponent's enchantments, you know, are pretty good, and they get to keep a pretty good creature as well. But if they get to keep like one creature or one planeswalker, that's where Bone Shards comes in. We clean up. So yeah, that's essentially the deck. It's been performing very well for me, so I do recommend crafting this one if you are into reanimation style decks. As I said, Otherworldly Gaze has been really impressive for me. You could also pick Consider as well, but Consider only gets to see one card. Otherworldly Gaze gets to see 3. And I think that's just really, really important. Plus it has the flashback, which certainly has an effect. I'm honestly surprised that this has a home, but here it is, and it is right at home. So yeah, make sure to hit the like button if you do enjoy today's video. Subscribe if you haven't yet done so already to get content like this in the future. Hit that bell icon to get notifications. And without further ado, let's continue. This video is brought to you by the generous support of our wonderful patrons and channel members that you see here. If you'd like to support the channel and get access to cool content like sneak peeks, bonus videos, polls on future content, or access to a personal deck critique from myself every month, then hit the join button down below, or check out the Patreon link in the description. With all that said, let's get into the gameplay. Alrighty, we're in, and we've got a 4-lander with a little bit of self-mill. Could be a bit stranded if the Stitcher Supplier doesn't hit anything good, but if we get like a draw and discard effect, then we've got Nezahal, and it's pretty good again in most matchups actually. So yeah, let's keep this one, and let's do, I want to say Watery Grave. You want blue-white for Faithful Mending? Otherworldly Gaze, okay. We got an Elishnorn in there as well, which against the Thraben Inspector deck's probably pretty good. I guess I am shocking myself to get the Gaze in the graveyard active. So is it just like mono white humans? So if I could Otherworldly Gaze and get Unburial Rites into the graveyard, we can turn 4 Elishnorn, which may or may not be too slow. We didn't do that, okay. We did get a Phyrexian Tower. So I'm going to put these 2 in the graveyard, and I'm actually going to take the tower. So that'll let me sack the Stitcher Supplier to do a little bit of milling. And that should be pretty good. Yeah, I'm literally going to let them take the 1 here. Normally I would block, but the tower gives me 4 mana total. So I could Unburial Rites. I could potentially do it now and see what I mill. Or I could wait. I think waiting's okay. It's like they could have Thalia's Lieutenant, but it still wouldn't save most of their creatures from getting swept away. Thraben Inspector would live. I guess my main concern is them playing Thalia. I can pay for the Sentinel with the Otherworldly Gaze, as long as I respond to it if they play Thalia's Lieutenant. Looks like they're thinking about just cracking a clue. Yep, there's Thalia's Lieutenant. Okay, so I'm going to do this in response. Pay the 1. Still not hitting the good cards. Okay. But we have Unburial Rites for 5 next turn anyway, so 3 for 5, 6, 7. I can take all that. And then we'll ban creatures. Sarah's Emissary, that's a good one. Let's start with Phyrexian Tower, I think. Just in case I hit Unburial Rites from the mill, and then I can just pay the 4 rather than shocking myself, which could end up being relevant. There it is. And Elishnorn. Couldn't pay for the 2 anyway. So they can get a card here. It's probably a card that dies to Elish Norn. And then they've got a 0-1 to play with. Alright. So they can have removal, I guess, for Elish Norn. What's the new one with Sorin? The 2-mana destroy and give me a clue. Maybe that's a card they're playing. I actually don't know what the removal looks like in their deck. I guess they could have, like, Skyclave, Apparition. They've got a Mikaeus that just manages to live. Okay, drew a Phyrexian Tower, which will do me no favors. It looks like I'm just going to go tap land, attack. So, Mikaeus isn't really even a concern, because if they put the counter on Thraben Inspector, they lose the Mikaeus, because this has to remove its counters. It can put a counter on itself for a turn, I suppose. But that kind of time is all I really need anyway. There's Ranger Captain, a 1-1 that can only get a card that dies, I think. Realistically. Giant Killer, 4 or greater power. Okay. That is, that's gonna work. Unless I get Sarah's Emissary in the graveyard and name instant. Could I do that? Is that possible? Not when I'm only drawing lands. Okay. I guess I'm just going to go on Burial Rites then and grab Cataclysmic Gearhulk so that even if they do Giant Killer my Elish Norn here, they're going to only have a creature to attack me with. And then I can Rites the Elish Norn back. So we're going to name creature and enchantment. Creature and artifact, sorry. They can only have creature. So creature, artifact. Gonna keep the Mikaeus, I would imagine. Yep. And Godless Shrine tapped. Swing for 4. We're actually able to hardcast Sarah's Emissary next turn. I guess I have to name instant because of Giant Killer being revealed. I don't know if it's going to be like a multiple of. I could even wait on it because they had to tutor the Giant Killer, so I assume that they haven't had one in hand. So I think I'll go Elish Norn first and then hardcast Sarah's Emissary. There's a Thalia. We'll get that killed real quick. And Stitcher Supplier. Goodbye, opponent. Goodbye. Alright, fair enough. I'm surprised that's the point where they decided they wanted to scoop it up. But power to them. Yeah, so we reanimate Elish Norn, Thalia dies. No matter what happens with Mikaeus. They can start putting counters on Mikaeus. I think they even missed an opportunity to do that. So it could have been a 2-2. And then that's my 5 mana. I then use Stitcher Supplier to fill the graveyard. Turn after, we name Sarah's Emissary with instant, so that none of my creatures can be targeted by Giant Killer. And yeah, go from there. Hardcast Nezahal, hardcast everything else we top deck. We're kind of at that point, which is pretty hilarious. So yeah, on to the next one. Okay, we are on the play. We've got turn 2 Faithful Mending that gets Nezahal and Sarah's Emissary in the graveyard. No black mana, but the Mending I think makes up for that, and we can probably draw into one. So I think I'm keeping this hand. It's a bit risky, but yeah. I mean, we've got 2 turns worth of plays lined up already. Green-white with Llanowar Elves. This is instant speed. Is there a reason for me to hold it? I guess they don't need to know that I have Sarah's Emissary. So it's probably Scurry Oak combo. Oh, there's Priest of Fellrights. Not going to be able to unearth Priest or cast it next turn necessarily. So here we're just going to be mana efficient, I think, and play the island so we can flash back the Faithful Mending. No need to show our opponent what we have in hand just yet. We can actually lose at any time, I would say, if we don't get Sarah's Emissary in play, because they can Coco here, get Scurry Oak and Soul Warden, and then they just have infinite creatures. Double Spellbinder before I get to draw and discard, alright. Let's see what they want to pick. Go with Priest, makes sense. This is actually really good for them, I would say. Takes the Bone Shards, sure. And there's my Swamp. Okay, so... what am I doing with my turn? I'll discard Faithful Mending. And I guess Maya Triton, and I'll just cast Stitcher Supplier. Then we get to Faithful Mending as well. There's a Hall and Burial Rites. Alright, so we have a Reanimation next turn. We have no Priest of Fell Rites, which we can cast. So what do they do if I name creature with Sarah's Emissary? That's the question. I don't have a feeling that they have an answer to that. Giant Killer, maybe, if Ranger Captain here can find it. Do they run a singleton Giant Killer? No, it's just a Soul Warden. Out it comes. Alright, I am going to block with Stitcher Supplier if they give me the option. Speaker of the Heavens. So the fact that they didn't get Giant Killer, knowing that my graveyard is full of things that it can kill, says to me that they don't have it. So as soon as I say protection from creatures, I think we're essentially safe. So, free block on Heliod. I wouldn't offer that if I were them. But, again, like, I already show a path to a win condition here anyway, so I don't imagine it really matters. I think we're just going to Faithful Mending. It's gain 2, but I'm essentially just going to put whatever I find into the graveyard, I would imagine. Well, maybe not a land. Alright, let's take... let's keep a land. Let's keep the Black Source, get rid of the Hallowed Fountain. Get rid of, I think, the Stitcher Supplier. Keep the land so I can hardcast on Burial Rites. Oh, you know what? Ranger Captain. Yeah. I did forget about that. I can still play Priest, though. And I won't shock myself here. So they need another Ranger Captain, then. But I have now officially remembered that that card has text, so they're going to have to do something a little bit more. Because I don't think they have got lethal here, right? Because I'm just going to block the Heliod. Take 9, 10, 11, 12. So it looks to me like I win. You tapped with Heliod before, so you probably want to do it again. 14. So I could take 3 in order to use Priest by not doing anything here, but I have the Unburial Rites, so I don't think it's really worth taking too much damage here. I can also just, like, unearth Priest of the Fell Rites anyway. So that should be no big deal. They tap out. I go to 10, a virtual 7 if I want to use the Priest. But I'm just going to use the Unburial Rites here, because then I can do either Otherworldly Gaze or Bone Shards. Whichever one I seem to feel is necessary, which is probably just going to be Otherworldly Gaze. Fill the graveyard with some nasty things. Keep the lands in hand for Nezahal. So, Sarah's Emissary names creature. I have protection from their deck currently. And yeah, we're just gonna otherworldly gaze, I think. I don't think there's a... yeah, there's nothing on board really that I have to bone shard, so... the following turn, now that I've got protection from creatures, I don't think there's a thing that I could do to protect the Sarah's Emissary, because we've got Nezahal only, really, as an option, but I guess I would go to 7 with Priest so that I could then Nezahal. And then any non-creature they play, like Coco, will draw me a card, but that seems to be the only non-creature that they really would have had. Yeah, it's a creature-focused deck, so Sarah's Emissary is just going to win the game on this one. Pretty sweet. On to the next one. Alrighty, on the draw, we've got a very, very, very slow hand, thanks to the brand new slow lands. But it could win me the game with Unburial Rites Sarah's Emissary, so I'm going to keep it anyway. And there's always a chance we get an untapped land off the top. Faithless looting. Faithful Mending's going to ruin my vocabulary now. They've got a Sarah's Emissary. So it's Mardu Reanimator versus Esper Reanimator. It's pretty funny. I can Sheoldred the Sarah's Emissary, so they can never name creature and have it matter. We are playing this untapped. Going Maya Triton. Got a Gear Hulk. Okay. Inquisition. Help yourself. Takes the Priest. No matter which one they took there, they could help me actually cast things, so... They've got Priest. I'm gonna go Deserted Beach, Faithful Mending, Dumping Emissary, Burning Rune Demon. Actually, no, I want to make sure I've got Unburial Rites, so... I have to name... For their deck, I have to kind of name Sorcery, I think, because of Bone Shards. Worry about the creatures later, or just trade my Emissary off with theirs. Just gonna looting. Does make sense, because then they can potentially find a better card for Priest of the Fell Rites. Let's see what payoffs they might have. Another Priest into the graveyard. So it's just Emissary here. They've got to decide whether or not that card actually matters. Okay. So they got Emissary here. The absolute nuts for us is to draw and discard Sheoldred so that I can kill their Emissary with a sack trigger. I think even they're considering hitting Sorcery, yeah. Get Nezahal. So definitely Rites. I actually think Rites Burning Rune Demon might be the play. Because then I can put whatever I want into my graveyard or into my hand. I could also just see Sarah's Emissary also naming Sorcery, Sorcery though. I'm buying us some time. Excuse me. Emissary, please. Naming Sorcery. Swing for 2. No protection there. They can replay it with Unburial Rites, but I feel like that was just a wasted use of resources, to be honest. Yep, they get it back now. Gonna name creature this time, so if I drew Bone Shards there, I could have punished that. I still could. I can go Faithful Mending. Burning Rune. Nezahal, I think, because I'm gonna hard cast Unburial Rites. And let's just double gaze, I think, so we'll shock. They've named creature, so I can't block, and I can't trade emissaries here. Seasoned Pyro. Not a card I ran in my own... Oh, actually, no, I did run it in my Madu list. It's a pretty good one. Looting. They've got Pyromancer, we've got Gaze. Shieldred... sorry, Elishnorn. There's too many. There's too many cards. I can't keep up with them all. Go to 15. Alright, so best card for us. We already have Gear Hulk. So that's Emissary. So I've got Sorcery and I can name Creature. I'm going to dump the lands. I don't want them. Priest. Yeah, I'll take Priest. I don't want the lands, though. So, yeah, other Emissary. So we got Sorcery, and now we're going to have Creature. So I think, unless they're running Shieldred or Gear Hulk, they can't answer this. But we have to assume that they do have one of those things. Hit you for 7. Oh no, I can't. Sarah's Emissary is a card. So how do we win this, then? Elishnorn their tokens into Shieldred Force to Sarah's Emissary sack, I suppose? Something like that. Pyro draws 2 cards. Let's get Burning Rune Demon. So Burning Rune Demon into play. Lets me search for 2 cards not named Burning Rune Demon. So we're going to get Elishnorn. And we're going to get... Did you name Sorcery with this? You named Creatures. I don't have 2 removal spells, right, with different names, because then I could put one into my hand and then the other. No, I don't. So Elishnorn and... Where's Shieldred? Could do Ulamog, actually. Ulamog's good. I can discard it later. I'm sure, somehow. They'll put Ulamog in my graveyard. Or in my hand, sorry. They actually didn't. Ulamog gets around Sarah's Emissary. It doesn't deal combat damage, but it still exiles. So... Not sure that was the best line for them. Sarah's Emissary, probably naming Sorcery. Yep. Alright, so we both have the same protections. But I have an exile triggering Ulamog. And he don't care about none of your cards. I'll play an island so I can use the flashback gaze. Sarah's Emissary. Name whatever you want now. Instant, sure. I've got creatures named, so I just let this go. Gaze, so that I can find out what's on top of my library. I'll get rid of these 2. Alright. And let them know that their plan is not going to work. So you got 11 cards remaining. I'll play the Priest, because I can play Elishnorn. Yeah. There they go. Esper beats Mardu. Good to know. I have felt, honestly, that the Esper list is a little bit more good. A little bit more good. That's a really good use of words there. A little bit more kind of efficient than our opponent's list. Ooh, they had Vanishing Verses. That might be why they thought they could deal with the Ulamog, but it actually says monocolored, and Ulamog is without a color. Shieldred could eventually make me sack an Ulamog, I suppose, but not really. Thought seizes. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything that could have prevented me from winning with an Ulamog there, so yeah, pretty sweet. And on to the next one. Alright, we are on the draw. We can get Nezahal into our graveyard, and we've got a little bit of other self-mill with Maya Triton to potentially get something else in there if it's like a creature matchup, in which case these are kind of like not that great. I'm going to keep this hand though. There's a lot of matchups where Nezahal's just like extremely good. Soulscar Mage. It's kind of annoying. Not gonna lie, that is kind of annoying. Yoshina Pyromancer. So it's hard to say in this matchup what you actually name with Serra's Emissary, given the chance. Because if you name instant, then they've got creatures to hit you with and skewer the critics. If you hit creatures, they've got instants to beat you down with. It's a tough one. I need to make sure that I hit my land drop, I think. So I think Faithful Mending's the line here, since Maya Triton doesn't help me reanimate anyway. So I'm just going to pass. This hand's not shaping up for a mono red win, unfortunately. I'll just Faithful Mending now, save them the effort. There's a land, okay. So Serra's Emissary and one of the Nezahals can go in the graveyard. Go down to 14. Sheoldred Whispering One. So Priest is definitely incorrect. I think it's Maya Triton, take one of the removal spells out of their hand, gain 2, and then mill a little bit as well. Maybe we get an Unburial Rites, fantastic. So an untapped land would mean Serra's Emissary or Nezahal comes out next turn. I think in which case, I think I'd name instant if I got my Emissary out. Reason being is I have a 7/7 that can then block all of these creatures and slowly gain back the life with Faithful Mendings. I mean, let's give it a shot. Gonna name instant. Let's see if I die. Instant, please. So it's only non-creature, non-combat damage that puts the -1/-1 counters on the Emissary. So something to keep in mind. They've got a Hazoret. Does that immediately win them the game? I think it does, right? Because I can't kill it. I'd have to name, like, creature with another one. And I don't have another one. Yeah, and then I'm dead on upkeep if I don't block the Hazoret here. Oh, this is a tough one. Let's do Faithful Mending. Otherworldly Gaze isn't going to do it. Dump Sheoldred. And one of the Gazes, I'm going to play Stitcher Supplier. And play my lands in case I top deck Unburial Rites. Elishnorn could do some work. Can't afford to attack here, I don't think. So Elishnorn does a little bit. It gets rid of these creatures here. And gives me a better attacking threat. But I'm a little worried about the Hazoret discard and sorceries they might top deck. Lightning strikes their Hazoret. Yeah, that kills me. Oof. Yeah, just not enough life gain there. As it turns out, a little bit of a quicker start, and we could have won that game. So we definitely had a line where we could get there. We had the Elishnorn to sweep these, then the Shieldred to hit the Hazoret. But that required several turns, and we just didn't have that available to us, so take the L on this one and moving on. Alright, we play first. We've got 2 ways of self-milling and then Unburial Rites to go, but it would be a turn 5 with Unburial Rites. It's still a keepable hand, but a little bit of an awkward one, I suppose. Need to hit a reanimation target. That's 3 lands that I probably would have liked to have drawn at some point. Fervent Champion for our opponent. Let's see if they want to trade. They absolutely do. Alright, that helps me a great deal. I always love it when your opponent's so willing to help. Alright, pay 2, gain 2. There's Elishnorn. That card will win me the game if I can get it out. Reckless Ringleader perpetually gives a card in their hand haste. And I will trade. Just trying to stay alive here. So any way of doing that is fine. Let's go Stitcher Supply and Maya Triton. See if we can hit an Unburial Rites for 4 and then top deck a land or something like that. As Otherworldly Gaze. I can now double block the Fervent Champion to kill it, for what that's worth. Goblin Chain Whirler, wow, okay. Land, Bone Shards, Emissary. So I'm going to... I'm actually not going to upkeep the Gaze here, because I still couldn't do what I need to do anyway. That's what I'm looking for, though. So, Faithful Mending. Discard, I think? You can play the Hallowed Fountain tapped. I want to keep the Unburial Rites so I can play it on 5 and then still have this one on 4. So now they have a surviving creature for Shieldred. Ow. It's a tough call now, because now we're in a situation where I could name creature with Sarah's Emissary, but then die to burn spells. But if I can set up a multi-turn situation where I get the Emissary in on creature so that I don't die, and then something like, you know, Elishnorn to sweep the board, that might be where we try to win on this axis. So I don't know if just Elishnorn's fine. It would kill the Fervent Champion, leave the Chain Whirler making 4 damage, and then a 3 damage burn spell kills Elishnorn. That's my concern. I think Sarah's Emissary is where I want to go, and I want to name creature. They need to have like 3 burn spells to kill Sarah's Emissary here. And if they have that, so be it. If they don't, then I'll reanimate Elishnorn, and then Sarah's Emissary should be well and truly out of range of burn. So this is interesting, because if I don't block and then they have the burn spells, I will die. But if I would die to Emissary being killed, I'd imagine I'm dead to just burn to the face anyway. So yeah, I think they're just bluffing there to try and get me to block, because if I block the Fervent Champion, they only need 2 3 damage burn spells, as opposed to 3. So, yeah, it's just about figuring out what they've got in their hand, I suppose, and taking the win from there. That Chain Whirler was kind of brutal, but we got there in the end. And yeah, we had the tools to take the victory here as well. I think just one more Emissary naming instant will probably just win us the game, like, flat out. And, I mean, in that time, they're being hit for 7, and we don't have to worry about them hitting back, so, yeah, we're probably going to get this game without any kind of additional assistance. Plus, the Elish Norn is kind of like, you know, a backup plan, and the Priest if we draw a land. So, yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video anyway. This deck has been sweet, it's performed very well, so I would recommend crafting it if you are into reanimation-style decks. I feel like it is better than the Mardu variant, mostly because you can actually hardcast all of your creatures, which is something the Mardu deck doesn't seem to want to do very often, although you can obviously build it in such a way. I used to have Nezahals in my Mardu deck anyway, because it was really good against Jeskai control. When you could unearth the Priest and get it out there uncounterably, which has proven to be still very useful in this format. But yeah, I like the idea that I can just hardcast my Nezahals as well when we get to that point. We seem to be able to survive long enough to get to that point as well, more often than not. So yeah, I'd recommend this deck, and hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. And without further ado, gonna end it off here. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.